Okay, signature assignment. By me, Ismael Frosto. Question, imagine you are driving or biking on a high traffic road and you are approaching an intersection with a four-way stop in real world train tracks. Additionally, there are three cars in another lane of the intersection and visibility is decreased because of foggy weather conditions. Senses are important tool we have in the human experience when coming to a stop. The senses we really do need to use is hearing. Hearing because we are listening to the sound of a train since we are stopped near the railroad track. Since and as well as in hearing for other cars honking their horns. Another important sense that we really need is sight, especially in this case since the weather is foggy and the visibility is decreased. Objectives are going to be hearing and vision, sight and hearing. We have came to a stop at the intersection driving our 2020 Bronco Sport. We are 50 feet away from a railroad. We stop and looking to the left. A car is at a stop. To the right, another car is at a stop. Straight ahead, another car is at a stop. Worst part, there is fog. It is important to have sight when looking on to oncoming traffic. The way we can safely cross is by putting our senses together. The first sense we will use is vision. The eyes capture the first visual stimuli, which would be the traffic that we see. The theory of an ideal observer is a power tool we use especially in this situation. We take everything into contact and we see that our eyes are mapping out shapes and motions of the car and even the colors. All this is needed in order to have our brain process the image in order to make a decision to determine when it is the best possible way to continue on our journey. During this traffic stop, fog is presented, causing visual impairment to an extent. The reason why fog is hard to see is because fog in itself is fine moisture droplets, which in turn light is shined onto it, which causes the light to be shattered and contrast is lost and causes white dense visibility. Using high beams is going to be useless, so reducing speed and driving with low beams light and turning on fog lights is our next step in making the decision to cross safely. It is also important to have total focus and not have distractions. Since the popularity of cell phones have come into place, driver safety has also declined, and a late reaction is applied when we are multitasking. An increase of accident rates in 2010 have been on the rise because of driving and having a conversation at the same time. The importance of sound is important, and while at this stop, because sound can help us be aware of what it is that we cannot see, especially near a railroad. During traffic stop, it is important to gather information onto oncoming traffic. Humans react to the characteristic of sound. Sounds create a visual picture and allows the brain to interpret that to make a decision. Since there is also a railroad near us and fog, we use sound to also hear for any emergency vehicles that is near us in order to proceed forward to safely cross to our destination. Senses that will not be used, smell or taste, these will not be used because a sense of taste or smell will help us to proceed to oncoming traffic in a safely manner. Also, touch, we will not be using the sense of touch, and also the vestibular system. The pathway of sight is the retina, then we go to the optic nerve, and then to the optic nerve we go to the optic chiasm, and then we go to the optic tract, and then we go to the lateral geniculate body, and then the optic radiation to primary visual cortex. Pathway of sight is the retina of the eyes, detecting cars from positions of right and left visual field. During this portion, it is split into the nasal retina, which is the left eye, and the temporal retina, which will get signals from the right eye. The ocular lobe is responsible for catching light, in which then is perceived by the retina. When we are looking onto the street and seeing the cars, the eyes are only seeing portions. We are seeing cars that are our left from the nasal retina, and the cars from the right is being seen from the temporal retina. Pathways of sight, the optic nerve, tract, and chiasm. The optic nerve is a central vision, sending sensory nerve impulses from the retina to the brain. And then we have the After that, it's going to be sent to the optic chiasm, and X is created from the optic nerve from each eye. And then we have the optic tract creates a complex visual picture of the car's left and right optic tracts. And then here we have the lateral geniculate body. This is where it's going to be sending signals and information from the retina to the visual cortex. Here we have axons terminating at the that terminate at the thymus. Primary visual cortex located at the occipital lobe. Basic analysis of the oncoming stimuli tract, which is going to be the traffic, is processed. Then we have consensual pupillary response. Eye contain neural connections, protectile neurons, axons terminate both sides and in the midbrain, sending axons back to the ocular nerve to the pupillary muscles. Light causes reflexes on both eyes. Then we have imaging processing by the brain. The brain interprets light by retinal axons that project to the lateral geniculate nucleus and also to the primary visual cortex. This creates an image that will be mapped by the retina. One of the most important things is the primary visual cortex that is responsible for how the brain processes location, the shape, color, and even movement that is combined from eye to eye. They are two general pathways that are in the primary cortex. That information is sent to. First is the dorsal pathway that involves partial lobe, and the second is the ventral pathway that ends in the inferior portion of the temporal lobe. When talking about the dorsal pathway, this pathway is associated with interpreting motion, and when talking about the ventral pathway, this pathway is important for the brain to process color and to form objects. This is especially important when trying to cross a street. The brain will need to map out shapes and the motions of the visual stimulus, which in this case is going to be the traffic at the four-way stop, looking for any type of motion in order to determine when it's safe to proceed. Then we have the auditory pathway, the cochlear of vestibular cochlear. Then it's going to go to the medulla pons junctions, and then going to the superior ovulatory nucleus, and then we're going there from the inferior collusus of the midbrain, the medial geniculate of the thalamus, and then the superior portion of the temporal lobe, and then lastly to the auditory cortex. Step 1, the sounds are introduced to the cochlear portion of the vestibular cochlear nerve, which then travels to the cochlear nuclei that is located in the medulla pons junction. When we have step 2, the cochlear nuclei, the axons that come from there are met with the superior ovulatory nucleus in the pons. Here, neurons are comparing information are coming from both ears, which in results causes it to determine where sounds are coming from. After step 2, the stimuli is then sent to the inferior collusus that is located in the midbrain. During this process, reflex are being started is created when there is an unexpected sound. The head and trunk coordinate with this type of stimulus. During step 4, the stimulus is sent to the medial geniculate nucleus, which is in the thalamus. During this step, the process is used to interpret sound and their frequencies and time interval. How the auditory pathway step 5. The last step is during the thalamus, which sends signals to the primary auditory cortex, and which is located in the superior portion of the temporal lobe. This is an important step because this is where the awareness of sound begins. We recognize sound, and the location, the pitches it creates, and how loud it is. How the brain processes hearing. The brain processes hearing by the stimuli that is present when we are at a stop. We automatically have a stimuli of beeping cars, engine rumbling, and even pay attention to see if a train is coming. All these sounds are picked up by our ear and travel by sound waves through the auditory channels. They are then transduced into a neural signal that travels to the central nervous system, in which is a site of interpretation. And then here are our scientific articles. And that is it for this presentation. Thank you so much.